Awake, July 2012. Will our world ever change? That is the question posed in our cover series. It begins with the article, "What would you change?" followed by, "What must change?" and finally, "What will change?" Next come, "Sea bugs for your dining pleasure," and "Help for children who grieve," followed by, "Young people ask, are we just friends or more?" Part 2. Our program continues with Watching the World and From Our Readers, followed by The Bible, a Book of Accurate Prophecy, Part 3. We Have Found the Messiah. After that you'll hear Was It Designed? The Newt's Regenerating Lens. And The Bible's Viewpoint, Who Can Change Our World? Followed by Remember to Say Thank You. Our program concludes with the article entitled, A Changed World, Will You Ever See It? And now we invite you to listen to our cover series, Will Our World Ever Change? And the first article,
What would you change? Which factor about our world disturbs you the most? Hunger, poverty, disease, crime, injustice, war, pollution, or prejudice? Which of the following would you most like to see? Peace between nations, affordable and better health care, end of discrimination, plenty of food and drinking water, safe neighborhoods, a clean environment, justice for everyone. Will your vision of a changed world ever be achieved? Some would say that the answer rests with government. Can world rulers change our world for the better? What do the facts reveal? End of article. What must change? Government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem. Ronald W. Reagan in his inaugural address as 40th President of the United States. More than 3 decades have passed since Ronald Reagan made that statement. At that time, the United States faced a colossal challenge, an economic affliction of great proportions, Reagan called it. We suffer from the longest and one of the worst sustained inflations in our national history, he explained. For decades, we have piled deficit upon deficit, mortgaging our future and our children's future for the temporary convenience of the present. To continue this long trend is to guarantee tremendous social, cultural, political, and economic upheavals. As bleak as his outlook may have seemed, Reagan was not entirely pessimistic. He stated, "The economic ills we suffer have come upon us over several decades. They will not go away in days, weeks, or months, but they will go away." How does the situation appear today? A 2009 report of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development stated, increasing numbers of people are vulnerable to overburdened infrastructure, inadequate housing, and outmoded health systems. In fact, the United Nations agency, UN Habitat, projects that within 3 decades, 1 of 3 people will live in near total despair, lacking sanitation and clean water, exposed to the imminent effects of climate change, fueling the spread of disease and possible pandemics. A global concern. Regardless of where you live, consider the following questions. Do you feel more secure financially than you did a decade ago? Do you believe that your health care is more than adequate for you and your family? Do you see cleaner surroundings and an improved environment? As you look to the future, can you see things improving over the next 10, 20, or 30 years? The following is supplementary information. What do young people say they would change about the world? According to the website forchildren.org, a survey in Britain of some 2,000 children between the ages of 4 and 14 revealed that they would do the following. Stop global warming. Calls all people to be treated equally. End war. Eliminate poverty. Stop hunger. A 2009 survey conducted by the Bertelsmann Foundation in Germany revealed the greatest concerns of some 500 young people between the ages of 14 and 18. Global epidemics and illnesses, lack of food and drinking water, climate change and destruction of the environment, poverty. Among the issues that young people considered to be of less importance were terrorism and the growing population. Even the financial crisis registered low on their list of priorities. According to the Bertelsmann Foundation's interpretation, this may be because the young respondents have not yet been affected by these problems in real life. Returning to the article. A social contract. Many governments have what is called a social contract, a written or implied agreement between rulers and citizens that specifies the rights and duties of both sides. Generally, for example, citizens are expected to abide by the laws of a country, to pay taxes, and to contribute toward a safe environment. Rulers, in turn, usually promise such things as adequate health care, equality, and economic security. How have governments performed in those three areas? Consider the evidence in the following information. Adequate health care. What people would like to see. Affordable treatment and effective cures. The reality. A report on sanitation and hygiene released by the World Bank states that every day 6,000 children die from diseases associated with inadequate sanitation, poor hygiene, and unsafe water. Diarrhea alone kills one child every 20 seconds. A major investigation in 2008 by the World Health Organization, WHO, into the way healthcare is handled in rich and poor countries concluded that it is dangerously out of balance and is failing to respond to rising social expectations for healthcare that is people-centered, fair, affordable, and efficient. 2 years later, WHO found that governments worldwide are struggling to pay for healthcare. As populations get older, as more people suffer chronic diseases, and as new and more expensive treatments appear, health costs soar. A deadly twist to healthcare has emerged. So-called miracle drugs may no longer work. Infections that used to kill millions of people years ago, such as leprosy and tuberculosis, were tamed by antibiotics, the first of which were introduced in the 1940s. But now, according to WHO's report, World Health Day 2011, the emergence and spread of drug-resistant pathogens has accelerated. More and more essential medicines are failing. The therapeutic arsenal is shrinking. What must change? We need to see the fulfillment of the Bible prophecy that foretells a time when, as we read at Isaiah 33:24, no resident will say, "I am sick." Justice and equality. What people would like to see. An end to prejudice against minority groups and mistreatment of women. A balance between the extremes of wealth and poverty. The reality. A report by the Leadership Conference on Civil Rights Education Fund stated, violence directed at individuals, houses of worship, and community institutions because of prejudice based on race, religion, sexual orientation, or national origin remains unacceptably high and continues to be a serious problem in America. Millions of women worldwide continue to experience injustice, violence, and inequality in their homes, the workplace, and public life, says a United Nations press release based on the report Progress of the World's Women in Pursuit of Justice. For example, in Afghanistan, some 85% of women have no medical assistance when they give birth. In Yemen, there are no laws against domestic violence. In the Democratic Republic of the Congo, on average, more than 1,000 women are raped each day. In October 2011, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon stated, "Our world is one of terrible contradictions. Plenty of food, but 1 billion people go hungry. Lavish lifestyles for a few, but poverty for too many others. huge advances in medicine, while mothers die every day in childbirth. Billions spent on weapons to kill people instead of keeping them safe. What must change? We need to see fair treatment of minority groups and women and an end to those who, as we read at Isaiah 10:1 and 2, wrest away justice from the afflicted ones. Economic security. What people would like to see. Employment for all. Financial security. The reality. World Watch Institute reports that there are more potential workers to drive economic expansion, but the number of available jobs may not keep pace. Given the current economic downturn, the International Labor Organization, ILO, estimates that the ranks of the unemployed reached 205 million people in 2010. The global economy is on the verge of a new and deeper jobs recession that may ignite social unrest, the International Labor Organization, ILO, has warned, states a BBC News report. The recent slowdown in growth suggested that only half the jobs needed would be created. The group, ILO, also measured levels of discontent over the lack of jobs and anger over perceptions that the burden of the crisis was not being fairly shared. It said scores of countries face the possibility of social unrest, particularly those in the EU and the Arab region. In the United States, average credit card debt now exceeds $11,000, triple what it was in 1990, says the book The Narcissism Epidemic, published in 2009. Many people go into debt, the authors assert, simply to project an image of wealth. Americans see people with fancy cars and clothes and assume they must be rich, the book says. In reality, it is often safer to assume that they are in debt. What must change? There should be employment for all, along with a balanced view of spending. The Bible acknowledges that money is for a protection, but also warns that the love of money is the root of all sorts of injurious things. Ecclesiastes 7:12 and 1 Timothy 6:10. From this information, it may seem that there is little basis for confidence in the future. However, the situation is not hopeless. Our world will change for the better, but not through the efforts of human governments. End of article. What will change? Nation will not lift up sword against nation. No resident will say, "I am sick." Death will be no more. These statements might seem too good to be true, but we can be sure that they are more than wishful thinking. Why? Because those are not the empty pledges of politicians who are powerless to change our world. Rather, the promises just quoted are found in the Bible. The footnote reads, the quotations at the beginning of this article are from Isaiah 2:4, Isaiah 33:24, and Revelation 21:4. End of footnote. Many people feel that the Bible is an ancient book that has no relevance to our day. Is that what you believe? If so, why not take a closer look at what the Bible contains? The fact is, the Bible is the only sacred book that traces mankind's history to the very beginning. It explains the following: how the human race fell into despair, how God purposes to remedy the situation, why governments cannot change our world, why we can trust God's promise to do so. Will God really eliminate starvation, war, sickness, and death from the human experience? Such a prospect is not difficult to believe once you accept the following. 1. God created us. 2. He cares about us. 3. He has the power to change the world. 4. He purposes to do so. Are there good reasons to accept those 4 points? Jehovah's Witnesses, who publish this magazine, invite you to find out for yourself through a study of the Bible. Perhaps you own a Bible, but seldom read it or do not read it at all. Even many people who read the Bible say that they find it difficult to understand. If that is true of you, We invite you to contact Jehovah's Witnesses for a free home Bible study. Millions of people worldwide are benefiting from that arrangement. How does it work? Each week, without charge, one or two of Jehovah's Witnesses can come to your home or another convenient location to discuss the Bible with you. These Bible study sessions will help you to answer such questions as, why do we suffer? Why are man's governments powerless to change the world? What is God's kingdom, and how will it accomplish what human governments cannot? The footnote reads, note the article, The Bible's Viewpoint, Who Can Change Our World, later in this program. End of footnote. For more information on how you can benefit from a home Bible study, contact Jehovah's Witnesses locally or visit our website, www.jw.org. You may also write to the appropriate address found on page 5 of the printed edition. End of article.
Sea bugs, for your dining pleasure. A group of famished patrons are seated inside a New York City restaurant. Using metal tools, they deftly break open the body armor of the huge insect-like creatures before them. Ignoring the retractable, tube-mounted eyes that seem to stare up at them from their plates, the eager diners bite into the tender, sweet meat. What are they eating? Sea bugs, more commonly known as lobsters. Why are lobsters called sea bugs? Fishermen could not help but note the resemblance to insects when these hard-shelled sea creatures crawled along the decks of their boats. But there is another similarity. During the 1700s, lobsters covered the northeast coastline of the United States like swarms of insects. These crustaceans were caught and spread on fields as fertilizer. They were used as fishing bait. They were fed to prison inmates. In those days, lobsters were so commonplace that a group of upset indentured servants in that region won a legal judgment, decreeing that they would not be fed lobster more than 3 times a week. In contrast, for distant city dwellers, lobster was a rare treat. Why? Because after its death, a lobster decays rapidly and cannot be preserved by salting or drying. By the mid-1800s, however, producers started canning lobsters, and thus more people were able to enjoy their delicious flavor. In addition, the arrival of railroads made it possible to ship live lobsters across the United States. As a result, demand for lobster spiked. Still, transporting fresh lobster was expensive, and thus it was a luxury to be enjoyed only by the wealthy. Today, fishermen catch varieties of lobster along coastlines throughout the world. The American lobster can be found in the Atlantic Ocean, from Newfoundland to North Carolina. A major international source of lobsters is Maine, in the northeastern United States. From there, cooked and live lobsters are exported around the world. Suppliers may transport as much as 80,000 pounds, or 36,287 kilograms, of lobster in a single aircraft. Corporations often mass-produce profitable global food products. But this is not so with lobster. For the most part, lobster fishermen are self-employed local residents. They do not artificially farm the lobsters in hatcheries, but travel to the lobster's habitat, in this case, the Atlantic Ocean. How to catch a lobster. How do lobster fishermen catch their prey? To answer that question, Awake spoke with Jack, a 4th-generation lobster fisherman in Bar Harbor, Maine. Jack began fishing at the age of 17, and he works in the same bay as did his great-grandfather. Jack's wife, Annette, is also in the business. I married into fishing, she says. For 2 years, I was an apprentice on Jack's boat, and later I bought my own. How do Jack and Annette trap lobsters? We take a lobster pot, a rectangular metal cage with a small opening, Annette explains, and inside it we put a mesh bag full of bait, typically herring. The fishermen attach each trap to a buoy. The fishermen each paint their buoys a different color so that later they can be identified, Annette says. Once the trap is thrown overboard, it sinks to the bottom of the ocean, and the color-coded buoy floats above it so that the fishermen can readily locate their traps. We let the trap soak in the water for a few days, says Annette, and then we go back and haul them aboard. When a lobster is inside, we take it out and measure it. Conscientious fishermen like Jack and Annette return small lobsters to the ocean. Some female lobsters are also set free to produce more young. Next, the fishermen head for nearby docks to sell their live harvest. Aside from some groups working collectively, there are no signed contracts, just local fishermen selling to local handlers. As mentioned earlier, lobster fishing has largely escaped the practice of artificial farming. Some lobstermen have been given permission to bring in egg-bearing females, Jack says. They hatch the eggs and raise them for a short time and then release them into the water. This practice increases the lobster's survival rate. The following is supplementary information. The hazards of lobster fishing. Lobster fishing might seem to be a safe profession, but it is not. For example, the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, NIOSH, says that from 1993 to 1997, the occupational fatality rate for lobstermen in Maine was 14 per 100,000 licensed lobstermen, more than 2.5 times the national average of 4.8 per 100,000 workers for all industries. According to NIOSH, a U.S. Coast Guard investigation found that lobstermen often become entangled in loose line on deck, are pulled overboard by the traps, and drown when they cannot free themselves from the line or are unable to reboard the vessel. In a survey of 103 lobster fishermen conducted from 1999 to 2000, nearly 3 out of 4 reported that at some point they had become entangled by trapline, although not all were pulled overboard. Safety measures have been recommended so that lobster fishermen could either have the tools to cut themselves free or prevent entanglement in the first place. Returning to the article. Lobster fishing may not be the easiest way to make a living or the best way to become rich. But if you ask these fishermen, they will speak of other rewards: the freedom of owning their own small business, or of continuing a community and family tradition, or of having the pleasure that comes from living and working on the coastline. Best of all, it brings deep satisfaction to these fishermen to know that their precious catch of sea bugs will be enjoyed by hungry diners all over the world. End of article.
Help for children who grieve. It is certainly not easy to break the news to an adult about the death of a loved one. But imagine having to tell a child. For many children, the experience of losing a family member or friend can be confusing, even frightening. Helping a child through this period presents a challenge, especially for grief-stricken parents. After all, they too need emotional support. Some parents try to soften the blow by telling the child that the deceased one has left them or gone away. However, such expressions are misleading and deceptive. How then can you talk to a child about death? Renato and Isabelle faced such a challenge. When their 3.5-year-old daughter, Nicole, died, they had to help their son, Felipe, who was 5 years old at the time, to cope with the loss. Awake. How did you explain Nicole's death to Felipe? Isabelle.
We sought to be honest and entirely open about it. We encouraged him to ask questions, and we always tried to answer them in terms a child his age could understand. Nicole died from a bacterial infection, so we told him that a little bug had got into her body and the doctors had not been able to kill it.
Awake. Did you share your religious beliefs about death with Felipe? Renato.
We are Jehovah's Witnesses, and we knew that talking about our Bible-based beliefs regarding death would comfort Felipe. The Bible is very clear. It teaches that the dead are unconscious. We reasoned that if we discussed this with Felipe, it would dispel any fears he might have, for example, about being left alone at night.
Isabelle.
The Bible also teaches that those who have died will be resurrected on a paradise earth. We believe that, and we felt that our belief would help Felipe too. So we talked to him about what the Bible teaches. We talked about the Bible account of Jesus resurrecting Jairus' 12-year-old daughter. Then we explained to Felipe that Nicole would also be resurrected. This is what the Bible teaches.
Awake. Do you think Felipe could grasp all that information? Renatu.
Yes, we believe he could. Children deal best with death when given accurate, simple, clear, honest explanations. There is no need to be secretive about it. Death is a reality. Unfortunately, it is still part of our experience. So parents need to teach their children how to deal with death, as we also did later with our younger son, Vinicius.
Awake. Did you take Felipe to the funeral? Renatu.
After weighing the advantages and disadvantages, we decided not to take him along. At his age, children are highly impressionable. Of course, some parents may decide to take their child, and each child is different as far as what he or she can handle. If a child is taken to a funeral, it would be good to tell him or her exactly what to expect.
Awake. Nicoli's death must have been a distressing time for you. Were you concerned about letting your son see you cry? Isabelle.
We never tried to hide our feelings from Felipe. If Jesus himself gave way to tears at the death of a loved one, why shouldn't we as well? And why shouldn't Felipe see us crying? Openly showing our grief made it clear to Felipe that breaking down in tears is not wrong. It's just a way to express emotions. We wanted Felipe to feel that he could express his feelings too, rather than bottle them up.
Renatu.
When tragedy strikes the family, children tend to feel insecure. So if we as parents are open and honest about our feelings, the children will be open too. After listening carefully to what's troubling them, we are in a position to reassure them and ease their fears.
Awake. Did you get any help from others? Renatu.
Yes, we received tremendous support from members of our congregation. With all the visits, phone calls, and cards we received, Felipe could see how much they loved and cared for us.
Isabelle.
Our family members were also very helpful. After Nicoli's death, my father decided to come over every morning to have breakfast with us. It was a gesture of his loving support, and having his grandfather beside him gave Felipe a lift.
Renatu.
The spiritual encouragement we got at Christian meetings was invaluable. We made an effort not to miss meetings, even though at times we could not hold back the tears. You see, being at Christian meetings brought back many memories of Nicoli. But we knew we had to be strong, especially for Felipe's sake.
The following is supplementary information. How to help. According to www.kidshealth.org, encourage questions. Create an atmosphere that will allow your child to talk about death and its meaning. Avoid using vague, abstract phrases, for instance, saying that the deceased left us or went away. Explain death in simple, literal terms. Some simply say that the loved one's body stopped working and could not be fixed. Tell the child what to expect at the funeral. Explain that the deceased will not be able to see or hear what is happening. Do not hide your emotions. In this way, your child will see that it is natural to grieve. Remember, there is no correct way to grieve. Each child and each circumstance is different. The following books published by Jehovah's Witnesses can comfort those who have lost a loved one in death. For adults, what does the Bible really teach? Chapter 6 answers the question, Where are the dead? Chapter 7 is entitled, Real Hope for Your Loved Ones Who Have Died. For young children, My Book of Bible Stories. Story 92 is entitled, Jesus Raises the Dead. For preteens, Learn from the Great Teacher. Chapter 34 answers the question, What will happen if we die? Chapter 35 is entitled, We Can Wake Up from Death. And chapter 36 answers these questions. Who will be resurrected? Where will they live? For adolescents, Questions Young People Ask, Answers That Work, Volume 1. Chapter 16 is entitled, Is it normal to grieve the way I do? End of article.
Young people ask, are we just friends or more? Part 2. In our previous issue, we considered two facts of life. When you get emotionally involved before you're ready for a serious relationship, you will get hurt. When you get emotionally involved before you're ready for a serious relationship, you can lose a good friendship. In this issue, we'll discuss a third fact of life about getting emotionally involved. How you can tell if you have crossed the line in your friendship with someone of the opposite sex. Fact of life. When you get emotionally involved before you're ready for a serious relationship, you can hurt your reputation. Mia says, I've seen boys who are friends with many girls. Basically, they're players. The girls think there's something going on, but the boy just enjoys the female attention. To think about. Whether you're a boy or a girl, how can getting too close to those of the opposite sex affect your reputation?
Texting people of the opposite sex is a huge pitfall. You start by texting just a bit to one person, but soon you're texting a lot and to many people. Before you know it, you're pretty much dating 3 different boys, and each one thinks he is the special one you're getting to know better. When they find out the truth, they get hurt, and you get the reputation of being a flirt. Laura.
The Bible says, even by his practices a boy or a girl makes himself recognized as to whether his activity is pure and upright. Proverbs 20:11. The bottom line, it isn't wrong to socialize with members of the opposite sex. But if you don't have boundaries, you can cause yourself grief, damage a good friendship, and harm your reputation. The following is supplementary information. Boundaries. Do associate in groups. Get acquainted. Enjoy conversation. Don't pair off. Confide. Flirt. Returning to the article, how can you tell if you've crossed the line? One way is to ask yourself, has a friend of the opposite sex become my sole confidant? If you're really just friends with a boy, says a girl named Erin, he shouldn't be the first person you want to talk to every day, or the first person you want to tell major news to. He definitely shouldn't be the one you turn to for emotional comfort. The following is supplementary information. True story.
I was friends with a boy, and we got along really well. But then I noticed our conversations were getting longer and more personal. I could tell we were getting a little too close because he would tell me all his concerns. Then one day he emailed me and told me he had feelings for me. I didn't know what to say. Part of me was flattered. It's nice when someone thinks you're special. But I was worried. I knew we couldn't continue being just friends because obviously he thought we were more than that. I knew that if I told him we were too young to have a romantic friendship, he'd be hurt. I told my parents about the whole thing, and they emphasized how important it was for me and for the boy to limit our contact. That experience made me realize how quickly something can go from completely innocent to very serious. And since then, I've been careful to limit my association with the opposite sex, especially when texting. It also helps to socialize in groups rather than pair off. That way, your conversations don't become too personal and your connection with the other person doesn't become too strong. Elena.
Returning to the article, to think about. Why might it seem appealing to make someone of the opposite sex your sole confidant? But what are the dangers?
The boys that I know are not my closest friends. I don't speak with them on the phone for hours as I might with a girlfriend, and there are some topics I simply won't discuss with them. Rianne.
The Bible says, be careful what you say. A careless talker destroys himself. Proverbs 13:3, Good News Translation. Consider, is there a risk in revealing too much about yourself to someone of the opposite sex? What if your friendship eventually fades? Will you regret having revealed such details to that person? A teenager named Alexis sums it up well. She says, "Don't avoid someone just because that person is of the opposite sex. On the other hand, don't lie to yourself and say that you're just friends when you're not. Keep your feelings in check, and you'll avoid a lot of pain." What your peers say. Andre.
The more time you spend with a girl, the easier it is for feelings to grow, and the more that person will think you're interested in a romantic friendship. If your goals don't allow for a relationship right now, then don't make it appear as if you're trying to start one.
Cassidy.
I tend to be outgoing, and since I grew up around boys, I'm very comfortable with them, which is not always a good thing. Treating a boy the way I would a girlfriend is not good. It can give the wrong idea. Treating a boy as if he were my brother is the way to go.
Why not ask your parents? Ask your parents for their thoughts on the two to think about questions in this article. Do their opinions differ from yours? If so, how? What merit can you see in their point of view? A note to parents. In proper settings, it's not wrong for young people to socialize with members of the opposite sex. But those who aren't ready to pursue a relationship that could lead to marriage need to set boundaries. For them, opposite-sex friendships should be just that, friendships, and nothing more. What results when two people get emotionally involved before they're ready for a serious relationship? Any initial thrill soon gives way to frustration. It's like sitting in a car that has no wheels. Sooner or later, the boy and girl realize that the relationship can't go anywhere. Some may begin to date secretly, a situation that is fraught with moral pitfalls. Others break up, a process that can leave both feeling cheated, hurt, and even depressed. How can you help your adolescent to avoid the treacherous path of a premature romance? The key is to keep an open door of communication with your adolescent when it comes to opposite-sex friendships. That way you'll be aware of it and available to help if a friendship starts to become something more. Some parents unwittingly close the door to that part of their adolescent's social life. Consider what some youths told Awake.
I always wanted to talk to my mom about whom I was attracted to, but I held back because I thought she would overreact. Kara.
When I'd tell my mom I was attracted to a boy, she would say, "Don't expect me to be at your wedding," rather than, "So tell me about your friend. What do you like about him?" Had my mom asked questions like those, I might have been more receptive to her advice. Nadine.
In contrast, note the difference when parents have patiently listened and then provided practical guidance.
My parents didn't overreact when I told them about a boy I was attracted to. They said what I needed to hear, but they were understanding of my feelings. Because of that, I find it easier to listen to their advice and open up to them further. Corinna.
When my parents opened up about whom they liked when they were younger, even explaining why a certain relationship didn't work out, it helped me to realize that it was okay for me to talk to my parents about having feelings for someone. Lynette.
Realize, too, that sometimes there are underlying factors behind premature romances.
When I was secretly dating a boy, it was because he made me feel happy and he listened to me. Annette.
There's this one boy I always enjoyed being around. He always gave me attention, which is my weakness. I love attention, good or bad. Amy.
When my parents sincerely tell me that I look beautiful or that a certain outfit looks good on me, I feel less of a need to get that same sort of compliment from a boy. Karen.
Ask yourself, how can I make myself more approachable to my adolescent? Am I swift about hearing, slow about speaking? James 1:19. How can I reduce the temptation for my adolescent to look outside the home for love and approval? The bottom line, Help your adolescent to learn how to keep friendships with the opposite sex above board and problem-free. It's a skill that will serve him or her well in adulthood. More articles from the Young People Ask series can be found at the website www.watchtower.org/YPE. End of article.
Watching the World. The Troubles leave their mark. A survey conducted in Northern Ireland shows that sectarian strife there has left its mark. The conflict, known locally as the Troubles, lasted for almost 3 decades and exposed 2/3 of the population to traumatic incidents. The University of Ulster's Bamford Center for Mental Health and Well-Being found that at some stage nearly 1 in 10 people in Northern Ireland will have suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, one of the highest rates anywhere, says the Irish Times. Proportionally, adds the newspaper, the Troubles were among the worst conflicts in the world, accounting for the death of 1 person in 500 of the population.
According to Pew Research Center, USA, cell phones can help prevent unwanted personal interactions. 13% of cell owners have pretended to be using their phone in order to avoid interacting with the people around them. BBC News Britain reports, the last 5 summers have seen the 5 lowest figures on record for the extent of sea ice in the Arctic.
Weather extremes are the new normal. The United States is experiencing more and more unusual weather. What used to be considered extreme, massive floods, killer droughts, and monster snowstorms, is the new normal. At an event organized by the Union of Concerned Scientists, Catherine Hayhoe, a climatologist at Texas Tech University, told colleagues, "We are used to certain conditions, and there is a lot going on these days that is not what we're used to." Hayhoe and other experts believe that human activity is fueling climate change and more volatile weather worldwide.
According to The Witness, South Africa, about 47% of Africa's arable land remains uncultivated. According to Family Relations USA, over the last 10 years, 10 countries, the Netherlands, Belgium, Canada, Spain, South Africa, Norway, Sweden, Portugal, Iceland, and Argentina, have legalized marriage for same-sex couples. End of article.
From our readers. Young People Ask, how can I make Bible reading enjoyable? April 2009 issue. I am a 24-year-old wife and mother, and I have always struggled with Bible reading. I took to heart the suggestions in this article, and I am making good use of the cutout that was provided. Now I look forward to Bible reading. I can see how the books of the Bible harmonize and are interwoven like a beautiful tapestry. I have never been this excited over Bible reading. Thank you so much. KT, United States. A Book You Can Trust, Part 6, April 2011 issue.
The article, Rome in Bible History, stated, "What happened to Jerusalem? The Roman armies returned, led by Vespasian and his son Titus, this time numbering 60,000 soldiers. The wording implies that Vespasian and Titus were at the head of the army when Jerusalem was attacked. However, historical references indicate that Vespasian was in Rome during this period." J.O., Australia.
Awake responds, according to Josephus, The Essential Writings, by Paul L. Meyer, Titus quickly arrived from Alexandria, bringing the 15th Legion, and joined his father at Ptolemais, where Vespasian waited with the 5th and 10th Legions. Additionally, the Encyclopedia of the Roman Empire by Matthew Bunsen states the following about Vespasian. With his son Titus at his side, he crushed the Jewish rebellion and was preparing to lay siege to the Temple of Jerusalem in 68, when word came that Nero had fallen and had been replaced by Galba. In the fall of 70, he arrived in Rome. So it seems that initially Vespasian and Titus were together in the attack against Jerusalem. However, at some point, Vespasian returned to Rome and left Titus in charge.
Do you have realistic goals? February 2011 issue.
When giving examples of unrealistic goals, this article included fame, riches, the ideal marriage mate, or perfect health. Why is an ideal marriage mate included? Why is the goal of getting a life partner in marriage unrealistic? SK, United States.
Awake responds, the article did not assert that marriage itself is an unrealistic goal. Rather, it spoke of the quest for the ideal marriage mate. In the context of the article, the ideal mate refers to a spouse that is flawless, possessing no negative traits. The pursuit of such a mate is vain for two reasons. First, such a person does not exist. Second, the quest to find such a mate focuses on what one will get from a marriage rather than what one will give to it. In this regard, even some married people have the unrealistic goal of turning their spouse into their vision of the ideal mate. In contrast, a solid marriage is made up of two people who acknowledge each other's imperfections but are still able to, as recorded at Colossians 3:13, continue putting up with one another and forgiving one another freely. End of article.
The Bible, a Book of Accurate Prophecy. Part 3. We have found the Messiah. This 8-part series in Awake is examining an outstanding feature of the Bible, its prophecies or predictions. The articles will help you to answer these questions. Are Bible prophecies merely the work of clever humans? Do they bear the hallmark of divine inspiration? We invite you to weigh the evidence. Many centuries before Jesus' birth, the Hebrew prophets foretold the coming of the Messiah, which in Hebrew means anointed one. Those prophets gave specific details about the future Messiah's life, including his line of descent, where and when he would arrive, and what would happen to him. Christians in the 1st century CE believed that these prophecies were fulfilled by Jesus. They felt as did the disciple Andrew, who told his brother Simon, "We have found the Messiah." John 1:40 and 41. Was that conclusion correct? Let us look at just 4 of the many prophecies regarding the Messiah, and in each case we will consider the evidence. Prophecy 1. He will sit on David's kingly throne. Isaiah 9:7, Knox. Fulfillment. Matthew's Gospel opens with the words, "The book of the history of Jesus Christ, son of David, son of Abraham." Matthew 1:1-16. Matthew then traces Jesus' descent through David, as does the Gospel writer Luke. What history reveals. The writings of Jewish historian Josephus indicate that genealogical records of Jewish families were available in public archives. Those records were destroyed in 70 CE when Jerusalem was pillaged. But prior to Jerusalem's destruction, the claim that Jesus was a descendant of David had been widely publicized. Had that claim been false, anyone could have challenged or even disproved it. Yet, there is no record that anyone attempted to do so. Prophecy 2. O Bethlehem Ephrathah, the one too little to get to be among the thousands of Judah, from you there will come out to me the one who is to become ruler in Israel. Micah 5:2. Fulfillment. Jesus was born in Bethlehem. When Caesar Augustus ordered a census, Jesus' foster father Joseph was obliged to go from Nazareth to Judea, or Judah, to David's city, which is called Bethlehem, because of his being a member of the house and family of David, to get registered with Mary. While there, Mary gave birth to her son, Jesus. Luke 2:1-7. What history reveals. Archaeology confirms that the Romans conducted censuses in the Middle East for the purpose of tax collection and military conscription. Evidence of one such census can be seen in an edict of the Roman governor of Egypt in 104 CE. A copy of that edict, now in the British Library, reads, "Seeing that the time has come for the house-to-house census,
it is necessary to compel all those who for any cause whatsoever are residing out of their nomes, or districts, to return to their own homes, that they may both carry out the regular order of the census, and may also attend diligently to the cultivation of their allotments. At the time of Jesus' birth, 2 towns in Israel were called Bethlehem. One was in the north, near Nazareth. The other, evidently formerly known as Ephrath, or Ephrathah, was near Jerusalem in Judah. Jesus was born in the latter town, just as Micah had foretold some 8 centuries earlier. Prophecy 3. From the going forth of the word to restore and to rebuild Jerusalem until Messiah the leader, there will be 7 weeks, also 62 weeks. Daniel 9:25. Fulfillment. The period of time specified in Daniel's prophecy amounts to 69 units of 7 years each, or 483 years. The rebuilding of Jerusalem began in 455 BCE. As prophesied, 483 years, or 69 weeks of years later, in 29 CE, Jesus became the Anointed One, or Messiah, when he was baptized and anointed with God's Holy Spirit. What history reveals. In the early part of the 1st century CE, the people were in expectation of the Messiah's arrival. Luke 3:15. In his book, A History of Messianic Speculation in Israel, Jewish scholar Abba Hillel Silver writes that the period before the destruction of Jerusalem witnessed a remarkable outburst of messianic emotionalism. He also notes that the Messiah was expected around the 2nd quarter of the 1st century. The anticipation of the Jews, Silver writes, was based on the popular chronology of that day. Prophecy 4. He will make his burial place even with the wicked ones and with the rich class in his death. Isaiah 53:9. Fulfillment. Jesus was executed alongside 2 condemned criminals, yet he was buried in a quarried-out tomb donated by a wealthy believer, Joseph of Arimathea. What history reveals. Numerous ancient non-Christian writers, including Jewish historian Josephus and Roman historian Tacitus, testify that Jesus was executed as a criminal. Archaeological investigations in Palestine have uncovered ancient tombs consisting of chambers or vaults cut into rock. Having such a tomb already prepared and available would not have posed a problem for a wealthy and influential person such as Joseph of Arimathea. The following is supplementary information. Timeline of 4 Messianic prophecies. 1. The Messiah would be a descendant of King David. 1070 BCE. David becomes king of all Israel. 607 BCE. Jerusalem is destroyed by the Babylonians. 455 BCE. Command is given to restore and rebuild Jerusalem. 2. The Messiah would be born in Bethlehem of Judah. 2 BCE. Jesus is born in Bethlehem of Judah in the family line of David. 3. The Messiah would arrive 483 years after the command was given to rebuild Jerusalem. 29 CE. Jesus is baptized and anointed as the Messiah. 4. The Messiah would die with sinners and would be buried with the wealthy. 33 CE. Jesus dies with criminals and is buried with the wealthy. Returning to the article. The foregoing represents just a few of the many messianic prophecies that were fulfilled in Jesus. Clearly, no human could falsify the fulfillment of those detailed prophecies. Their precise fulfillment strengthens our faith that God was their source and that He will yet bring all the foretold messianic blessings to reality for obedient mankind. In the next article in this series, we will discuss an intriguing question. If Jesus really was the promised Messiah, why did He allow Himself to suffer and die? End of article.
Was it designed? The Newt's regenerating lens. The newt, a small salamander, is remarkable for its ability to regrow body parts, such as its organs, tissues, limbs, and tail. But are the replacement parts as good as the originals? When it comes to the lens of the Newt's eyes, researchers say yes. Consider, newts regenerate the lenses in their eyes by converting iris cells into lens cells. To learn more about this process, biologists spent 16 years observing a group of Japanese newts. 18 times, the biologists removed the lenses from each newt. Each time, as expected, the newts grew new ones. By the end of the study, the newts were about 30 years old, 5 years beyond their expected lifespan in the wild. Yet they were still able to regenerate lenses as quickly as they could when they were younger. In addition, reports the University of Dayton in Ohio, USA, the regenerated lenses were virtually identical to intact lenses removed from full-grown newts, which had never undergone lens regeneration. Biologist Panayotis Sonis, a member of the team that studied the newts, admits, "Even I was surprised a little." He described the new lens as perfect. Scientists hope that the newt's abilities to regrow damaged body parts will help them to understand how to regenerate damaged tissue in humans. The newt is an excellent source for finding answers to regeneration, says Sonis, particularly as it relates to old age. What do you think? Did the newt's regenerating lens come about by evolution? Or was it designed? End of article.
The Bible's Viewpoint. Who can change our world? The world's people want answers from their leaders. They expect solutions, not half measures or excuses. United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. We live in what the Bible calls critical times, hard to deal with. 2 Timothy 3:1. The news is glutted with ominous reports of war, terrorism, economic strife, and impending environmental ruin. Is there any hope that things will improve? Can man's governments deal with world problems? Or do we need to look elsewhere for help? What many nations claim. Many nations claim to have God's support. For example, in its Pledge of Allegiance, the United States of America asserts that it is one nation under God, and the coins and paper money in that country bear the words, "In God we trust." Of course, many who live in the United States do not even believe that God exists. And the same is true in other lands that claim to have God's backing. Even people who do believe in God have differing views regarding the extent to which He intervenes in human affairs. Some say that God is completely detached and that man is left to rule himself. Others say that God works through human governments and that He can bless their efforts to change our world. Which, if either, expresses what you believe? Consider, if the first statement were true, we would be in a dire predicament. If the second statement were true, then we would have to ask ourselves, does God favor one nation over another? If two nations go to war and both fervently pray for victory, whose side does God take? Is it possible that He takes neither side? What the Bible teaches. 1. Man was not made to rule himself. The Bible says, "It does not belong to man who is walking even to direct his step." Jeremiah 10:23. History verifies the truthfulness of that statement. Government by man has not brought a better world, even when rulers have had high ideals and the best of intentions. Instead, man has dominated man to his injury. Ecclesiastes 8:9. 2. God cares about our plight. He is neither oblivious to nor unfeeling about what we experience. Furthermore, He will take action to help us. How? By means of His kingdom, which will never be brought to ruin. Daniel 2:44. 3. God's kingdom is a real government. It is the same kingdom that millions of sincere people pray for in the often recited Our Father or Lord's Prayer. In that prayer, people implore God, "Let your kingdom come, Let your will take place as in heaven, also upon earth. Matthew 6:10. Note that God's kingdom affects more than heaven. It also makes it possible for God's will to be accomplished on earth. 4. By means of His kingdom, God can and will change our world. If you doubt that, consider what the Bible teaches. God gave the human race a perfect start in peaceful surroundings. Despite the problems we see, God has not abandoned His purpose for our earth. God has already taken steps to make it possible for our earth and the human race to be restored to the condition He originally purposed. Would you like to learn more about God's kingdom and how it will change our world? Jehovah's Witnesses, the publishers of this magazine, would be happy to help you. Why not discuss with them the following topics the next time they call at your home? What is God's kingdom? What changes will it bring? When and how will God's kingdom bring those changes? Have you wondered, why are human governments limited in what they can accomplish? How has God demonstrated that He cares about us? What will God's kingdom make possible for our earth and those who inhabit it? End of article.
Remember to say thank you. When was the last time you received a thank you note? When was the last time you sent one? In this world of cyber communication, handwritten messages of gratitude have become something of an endangered species. Yet saying thank you in writing is a special way to let people know that you appreciate their kindness. The following are some suggestions on how to do so. 1. Handwrite the note to give it a personal touch. 2. Address the recipient by name.
Dear Aunt Mary.
3. If you received a gift, name the gift and tell how you plan to use it.
Thank you so much for the alarm clock. Since I am a chronic oversleeper, I have already put it to good use. It was a pleasure to see you last week, and I hope you had a safe return home. We look forward to seeing you in the near future.
4. Restate your thanks in closing.
Thanks again for your thoughtful gift. Your nephew, John.
A thank you note makes a good impression on the recipient. So the next time someone is hospitable to you, does a kind act, or gives you a gift, show that you do not take that one's efforts for granted. Remember to say thank you. The following is supplementary information. Tips. Refer to monetary gifts indirectly. For example, rather than specify the amount that you received, you could say, "Thank you for your generous gift. I plan to use it for..." Include only information that relates to the gift and your appreciation for it. This is not the time to give a detailed account of your summer vacation or of your recent trip to the hospital. Do not complain about any problems you had with the gift. For example, it would be unkind to write, "Thanks for the toaster, but it doesn't fit on my kitchen counter." Returning to the article. The Bible promotes a spirit of thankfulness. At 1 Thessalonians 5:17 and 18, it admonishes us to pray incessantly to God, adding, "In connection with everything, give thanks." End of article.
A changed world. Will you ever see it? The opening articles in this issue of Awake discuss a yearning that people the world over feel. A yearning for a better world. Is there any hope that you will ever see such a thing? The publishers of this magazine, Jehovah's Witnesses, believe that the Bible holds the key to understanding what the future holds. It is the only sacred book that traces the history of mankind back to its beginning. The Bible also tells us where we are heading, and it is not to the bleak future that many envision. Would you like to learn more about what the Bible says on this topic? The book, What Does the Bible Really Teach?, can help you. It is published by Jehovah's Witnesses and is now available in 244 languages. End of article. For further information, please visit our website at www.viewpoint.org. www.jw.org. End of magazine.